Do you like to spin to win? Do you like doing obscene amounts of damage? Then Barbarian Whirlwind is the way to go. However, we're here showing you a brand new build for Diablo 4, and it's pretty insane. I know, you've heard this before. This build is insane. This build is next level. However, this one actually is, and I have proof. I'm going to show you, first of all, me being at level 75 or 76, farming a nightmare, like speed farming a nightmare dungeon with level 103 mobs. That is level 48, and I'm not going to be cheesing. I'm going to show you the affixes beforehand so you know exactly what they are. I skip every single shrine, and it's literally a speed farm. So what's the difference here? The main difference is I'm running no bleeds. Let me think, Murder, how are you running no bleeds? Isn't that the core aspect of Whirlwind Barb? It is, but not for my build. Why? I'm going to explain that to you next. What's up, barbarians? It is Murdering here, talking about the, I don't even know what we want to call this, the on hit build, no bleeds. So what did I do? I front loaded all of the damage. What does that mean? Instead of doing damage over time, which is what a bleed is, I put all of my damage in the brutal, hard hitting whirlwind raw damage, and it worked out incredible. So I'm level 90 now. I'm much higher than I am in the video showcase because I've been testing a few things, lots to talk about here. So first, who cares about the build? I need to show you a gameplay. You need to proof of concept. Does this work? And make sure you check out my other video on the biggest video in Diablo 4, because you're going to find out pretty quickly that anyone can show you a build of them doing same level content. But when it comes to what I'm going to show you here, and I'm just going to start playing this clip here, tier 48, and if you look at the bottom of the screen, I'm level 76. Who's level 76 speed farming tier 48? Show of hands. Maybe you are. Maybe I'm on one, and maybe this is an easy thing to do. We're talking level 76 to level 102 or 3. That's almost a 30 level difference in a nightmare dungeon. Now, I showed you the affix in case you didn't grab that. I'm going to go back very quickly here to where I show the modifiers, and you're going to notice that there is one that benefits me greatly, but there's one that's very negative towards me. Let's pause it real quick. Physical damage, 15% more physical damage. Huge. Not going to argue that. But what's on the bottom? On the bottom, most monster vulnerable resist. If you know anything about any class in this game, vulnerability is overpowered. And specifically for most classes, but this build and all barbarian builds, vulnerable damage is massive. And if you start reducing the duration of vulnerable damage, we take a hit. We take a hit. So I was comfortable with running this one because there were a few things working against me, and not just straight benefit to this build here. Of course, monster gains 30% of their maximum life as barrier. Helps a bunch for sure. Makes them tankier, they're alive longer, and that's why this build is so good. So now that I went over that very quickly, let's head straight into the nightmare dungeon here, and we are off. So just going to quickly talk about this. Like I already said before, this is level 102 here. I'm flying through that. The numbers are high. I do have to be careful, like speed farming, but if you're going to do it efficiently, it's not just going to be brainless like most people think about Whirlwind. Kind of is. Spin to win, oh, immersive gameplay, whatever. But you're going to notice really quickly here, I'm pumping like I'm hitting hard. We're seeing 400,000 hits. You're going to see up to 600,000+ hits on enemies that have a reduced vulnerability rate. Now, the main thing to notice here is I'm actually using ground stomp. It's going to be a core part of the build, and in my main hand, I'm using my bludgeon weapon, as you can see me spinning with. I'm not using a sword, I'm not using an axe, I'm using a bludgeon weapon. Now, what does that give me? Well, when I go over the talents and passives, you're going to see right away. It gives me the ability to stun enemies, giving me another layer of defense, which is huge here because as good as this build is, if your shouts fall off, which is gear dependent, again, we're going to go over that. But as soon as you're in, as we saw there, 500k, I got pretty low. I got scared and started drinking and chugging the potions, but If you're in between shouts and you don't have all the legendaries you need, and I desynced my shouts here, quick tip if you're a barbarian, you can only press, 2 or 3 shouts at a time. I think it's 2 shouts at a time, and the other one won't click. So you have to do kind of like a 1, 2, 3 click on it. If you spam all 3, only 2 are going to go off, which is what happened to me here, and it desynced my shouts, which is very dangerous in a dungeon like this. So why did I pick on hit damage? Because I noticed that if I'm bleeding targets, even if I'm doing a little bit more damage than the current build here, they're hitting me more times. If I just front load my damage, I'm bursting them down, especially the low ones, because if you're bleeding a low level target with not a lot of health, it's going to take 2 or 3 ticks to kill them. And in those 2 or 3 ticks, they're going to hit me twice. When I use on-hit damage, I'm only getting hit once or 0. I'm just one-shotting them. These things matter. This is a defensive layer without a doubt, and it helps you out so much in survivability. The second thing is there's incredible synergy between stunning and bludgeon weapons. There's a talent that I'm going to show you that has an increased chance just by hitting a target. And okay, main thing here, and this is important. There was a protection shrine there. What did I do? I looked at it, I said, not today, and I walked right by it. Why did I do that? Was it for fun? No. Anytime you're ever watching a showcase build of any kind, and if people are actually clicking on shrines, they're griefing you, because it means they're flying through the dungeon at a rate they shouldn't be, and you're not going to be able to see the build. And honestly, that's what matters. You need to see the build, you need to see it working, you need to see that they didn't just get carried with this shrine here. So as we can see, I'm just pumping through this dungeon. Now, in the end, it ended up being pretty slow here, and you're going to see when I show my map why it was slow. Okay, let's go back. It's right here. So, okay, this is the issue. I have 1 prisoner left to free, and I said, ain't no way that the prisoner is in the bottom right corner that I can't see. Surely it's in the top left right before I move on to the next zone. Can you guess what happened? The prisoner was right next to me, and I ran by it, so I had to run all the way back down here. GG. I griefed myself. I understand it. I'm okay with it. It is what it is. But as we can see here, I'm running by the protection shrine once again, because don't ever pick up a shrine if you're doing a video showcase. It robs the viewer of what you can actually do. But so far from the death count, I have not died once in this, and I'm blasting through and through. Of course, you have to be careful. Like I mentioned earlier in this video, it's not just GG easy. There was a 500k crit that we saw there. So what I was getting at with these stuns is you do increased damage to stun targets. That's major here. This is where I realized my mistake, and I'm kind of going like that right now, saying, what did I do? So increased damage to stun targets. I'm not going to go on and on about this because I pretty much showcased all the relevant stuff here as far as what the build looks like. I'm going to show you more gameplay a little bit later on of my current level, where if you are curious, I'm going to just lower this. I'm level 90 in game, so I've been pumping since then. I wanted to test a lot of things. So what is the build? Why is it so strong? Wait until you see the skill tree. If you play a Whirlwind Barb now, you're not even going to recognize this. So the first thing is we have no points in launching strike, whatever. We don't take Furious Wind. Why don't we take Furious Wind, and why are we not even taking bleeds altogether? Because there are so many problems with bleeds, it's unreal. There is someone who made an amazing post in the Diablo Discord. Definitely go to it. It's the Theorycraft build section. Just search Barbarian, and it's one of the top ones. Really smart player. He kind of broke it all down. Bleeds are bugged. So what's wrong with bleeds being bugged? You need to know this. Rage of Haragath. This is a chess piece lots of players are using. Do you know that not all of your bleeds are lowering your cooldown? They're not. Then what the hell is the point of using this? Some of your bleeds are, but not all of them. When I found that out, I said, get this dog water chest out of my face, fix your game, I'm not running bleeds until then. However, if you really want to know which bleeds do in fact work, I need to tell you this because it's going to be important if you are low level. This is not a build you're going to be able to use at level 30, at level 40, and just blast through. You're going to have a good time with it, don't get me wrong, but it requires some investment. I'm not here trying to trick anybody here. It does require some investment, as any fun build should. So the first thing is Battle Lunging Strike. This is a direct bleed that is going to reduce the cooldown. The next one is going to be Furious Winds. If you were looking at aspects like ripping, no, that ain't it. And they're just, I don't have the exact amount. Like I said, definitely go and check out this post if you're playing a bleed Whirlwind and you're wondering why your build's not working well. That's why. It's not reducing the cooldown like it should, unless you're taking very few options here. So as soon as I saw that, I said, how would I hinder my gameplay and be limited on aspects because something's not working right? So I said, let me just do more damage. So I took Violent Wind here. Violent Wind's incredible. Now there are people abusing Violent Wind paired with, I believe it's Unconstrained. Increase the maximum duration and increase the damage bonus. It's just scaling to the moon. We're not doing that. We're just taking Violent Wind because we want to do on-hit damage, and that's more on-hit damage. I also took 3 in pressure points, which is fine here. And of course, we have Ground Stop, item contribution 3, which means I only have 1 point from my own personal talents that I did put in here. Obviously, you're going to need that. Then you take Ground Stomp duration by 1, which is big. It's a longer CC. Now, the next one's really strong. Strategic Ground Stomp. Reduce the cooldown on the ultimate skill by 1 for each enemy damaged. So, think about that for a second. Just think about that for 1 quick second. Our ultimate is Wrath of the Berserker. Very strong, 47-second cooldown. 47.3. I won't round up in this video. Think about how many mobs you can have around you. Think about what this does, reducing the cooldown by 1 second for each enemy damaged by Ground Stomp. You have Wrath of the Berserker up so much longer, you're pumping so much harder because of the uptime, and it'll make your runs a lot more smooth. The next thing is Rallying Cry. All of this is pretty self-explanatory, so I'm not going to go through it all, just the kind of newish ones that I did not take. Did not take Raid Leader, you don't need the healing for this build. I did not take Aggressive Resistance, and I did not take Prolific Fury. You're going to see why. That's going to be a little bit later in the video. No Mercy, Pit Fighter, all of these things are good. We did not take Hamstring. We could save that because we don't have to crowd control that way. This is the important part. Heavy-handed, of course, but Wallop. I have +3 on a neck piece, which I will go over. Your skills using bludgeoning weapons deal 30% multiplicative increased damage if the enemy is stunned, important, or vulnerable. What do we have? Ground Stomp, AoE stun. We are pumping these targets. Vulnerable, core part of our kit. We get that from many other things. You'll see the talents above here. Where is it? Where is it? Pressure point. Your core skills have up to a 30% chance of making enemies vulnerable for 2 seconds. Very, very strong. Enemies are vulnerable often. Now the next thing, Concussion. Skills using bludgeoning weapons have a chance to stun enemies for up to 3 seconds, and it's a 45% chance since we're using a two-hander. That is huge. That is a massive defensive layer. This build isn't all about damage just because it's softcore, not hardcore. If I was playing in hardcore, I would probably use this build because stuns are good. Even though it's not consistent stuns, probability is you're going to be stunning very often, and that's less damage received to you. Outside of that, the build is fairly straightforward. Now, as far as the core items, we are not using Temerity. Now, you might be thinking, isn't a barrier really nice that you can proc all the time that lasts for 8 seconds? Sure, but look at what we don't have. Let's look at the stats in the pants. 18 all stats, 15% potion drop, lucky chance to heal, healing received. Now let's compare what a good pair of legs have. 19% damage reduction against distant enemies. 16.7% of damage reduction while fortified, which we are all the time as barbarians. Maximum life, total armor. Just think about the difference now. And then, of course, disobedience, 0.5% armor, which is increased, stacks up to 50% increased armor. And we're talking about a barrier. What's the barrier even for? First of all, most people think the barrier is for this conceded. Deals 23 multiplicative damage while you're under a barrier. I'm just using Protector on my neck. That's a 6.8 thousand barrier that happens for 10 seconds when I damage an elite. If you think you need increased damage on normal mobs in this game, there's something wrong with your build. Your build is not pumping, and I can tell you that for a fact here. So now that we went over that, you still may not be convinced. You might be saying, Murder, this sounds good, but using a bludgeon weapon in the main hand, I know I'm supposed to be taking a sword, or an axe here. My expertise, I have axe expertise, of course, and I'm also getting this. When using a two-hand weapon, has a 10% chance to gain 2 Fury when hitting an enemy, double the amount of Fury gained while berserking. I'm berserking more often, of course, because I have Wrath of the Berserker, which of course makes you berserking. My uptime is very high because of the ground stomp, and of course you do also get berserking from your war cry. So these two things together help me out a ton. Another thing, two-handed sword expertise, the bleed from this, once again, is not working with that other chest piece, so... And while it is a good bleed, it's just not going to cut it for you, trust me. And while it can be a decent source of damage, it's not going to come close to what I'm showing you here. So, like I said, if you're still not really convinced about this, I'm going to show you gameplay of my character while I was leveling up now. Okay, so here I am at level 89 in Champion's Demise, one level prior to where my current character is now. Look at these numbers. Just have a look. You're going to be seeing 700k. There was a 1.2 million that I should have paused on. I'll just hover the pause button for when we see the next pumper number. All right, what do we got here? Okay, 1.1 million. 1 million. Just think about this for a second. This is my raw damage done per spin. So we have a million, we have 831,000 here. This build isn't something that falls off like a lot of builds do in showcases. This just continues to scale with you and your levels. This is why I kind of started off at a low level when I first did that push. Now I'm pushing like tier 60 maps. It's kind of crazy. So this is kind of just to show you how insane the damage of this build is. And the purpose of this build was for adding a defensive layer being stuns. That's what the purpose of this build was for. Now, there's one thing that I do have to talk about. Now I'm kind of showing you the crazy numbers we're seeing here, and I mean, they just get better and better and better. I mean, there's just so many numbers. This is not the greatest example, but I was able to pause and show you the millions that we were doing before here. 500k without any major buffs up. It is what it is. 800k on a swing. 700k, 1.2 million. The highest Whirlwind crit I've seen, where all buffs are aligned, is 1.8 million damage. 1.8 million damage, and I'm pretty sure, I mean, there's 1.4. I'm pretty sure the 1.8 actually happened in that clip, and I just didn't pause it enough. So that is the second showcase, just to show you that this build doesn't just fall off greatly. So we got the bludgeon weapon. This is your main source of damage. You put this, of course, in your swinging hand here, and you have tons of damage, lots of survivability from those stuns. As far as the helmet goes, cooldown reduction is huge. Life on kill and all stats is like terrible. My helmet's probably my worst slot here that I need to upgrade, which just goes to show you that this build isn't even fully optimized. This is just the tip of the iceberg. We have the Whirlwind aspect here. We have Fury to Fortify aspect here, +3 Rallying Cry, damage reduction, damage reduction, damage reduction. Close enemies, while fortified, and distant enemies for the rolls there. Okay, this is where I have to talk about this. I'm using Gores because I just got them. I've been farming for them forever, and I just got Gores. I don't understand how Gores works with this build. I'm going to say that, I'm going to admit that, even though this is a guide video, you're supposed to be watching this to figure out from this video that I'm presenting to you in this build what the deal is. This is why I don't understand Gores. If you are a lead Whirlwind Barbarian, how hard does your Gores hit? At the moment, for me, the Gores is hitting from 1.7 million to 2 million. It's pretty good. On this weapon, instead of Limitless Rage, I had an aspect that I stupidly made the mistake of overriding, and I haven't pulled it since. It is the one that, I mean, I should pull it up, but I'm not going to. It has to do with Earthquake, where the Earthquake lays down a layer of like a constant earthquake for 4 seconds. And while you're standing inside of that, it deals multiplicative damage. So for some reason, when I had that aspect on this weapon, instead of Limitless Rage, my Gores, Devastating Grips, when I was level, I think 84, it was critting for 7.8 million damage, and I tested it for a long time and I could not figure out why. It wasn't because I was standing inside of the effect from the legendary. It wasn't because I was hitting the cap of 100 hits and farming. It was happening like sometimes 3 seconds after spinning and letting it go. Just 8 million damage. So I don't know where that's coming from. I think it's a bug. It could be something to do with the multiplicative damage on a stun target randomly. I mean, I did not have Retribution at the time, so this is also a pretty big multiplier. 38 multiplicative damage increased to stunned enemies, and maybe I hit a distant enemy, pulled them in, the gores procced on them, and I saw the 8 million damage. But like I said, I have not been able to conclusively figure out why gores was hitting so hard with that earthquake aspect on. Now that I don't have it on, I have never seen a number that high before. I've seen 3 million, I've seen 4 million, I've never seen 8 or 9 million damage proccing from gores within 5 seconds of using Whirlwind and letting it go. So I cannot say why it's doing that, but it is what it is. Maybe someone else knows. So with that being said, do you need gores? They're okay. Unless I can figure out what that bug was, or however it's supposed to work with the earthquake aspect, if they're even related. I'm just speculating at this point, because that's all that makes sense to me. You can get away with, and I'm probably going to swap to this, a pair of gloves with +4 ranks of Whirlwind. They start off +2 or +3, and you rank them up unless they're +3, +4, once they're 5 out of 5. Crit rate is really important for this build. We get a lot of crit rate from hitting a stunned target. I'll go back to the skills really quickly and show you where. We get an additional 9% if they are stunned, and we're stunning like I showcased quite often here. So that's my take on gores. They're good, low drop chance, you don't really need them, and until I can figure out how to abuse whatever I was doing before, it's just not consistent. As far as boots here, Fury cost reduction is mandatory. Why is it mandatory? Because I got rid of every single ability on this skill tree that gives me increased Fury generation. Where are they? I know there's a bunch of talents somewhere that increase your gen. Okay, so here's the first one. Fury gen is increased. Got rid of them both. I said, whatever. Out with you. I originally had Tactical Ground Stomp, which was generating Fury for me. Got rid of that. Didn't need it. And then finally, as a whole, I dropped Lunging Strike from my kit altogether. So, if you're endgame, that's what you want to do. What are the substats you want? Crit damage, strength, close damage, and vulnerability damage. Those are the best of the best, those three. If I had to pick a best three, this might trigger some people because I've seen people arguing until they're blue in the face about it. This is what I do. You can do whatever you want. Crit damage, vulnerability damage, and strength are my top three. Close damage is not in my top three. It's from what I've tested and from what I've found to work the best for me. If you want to go a separate way and you want to value close damage to enemies higher than strength, you may do so. I'm not here to tell you what to do, what not to do. If you're curious about my base stats, I will show you that really quickly as I'm going through this. We have 350% crit damage, 225% vulnerable damage, which means that too much crit damage for me is not going to be good, right? So if I'm looking for any upgrades, I want vulnerability damage. The more you get, the less effective it becomes, and barbarians are busted because we have 4 weapons as it is, so we're always going to run into this problem. So as we can see on the next weapon here, we have Retribution, like I showed you, crit damage, close damage, core skill, strength. I'm probably going to re-roll this crit damage into vulnerability damage to get them kind of closer together to even out the gain I get. Here we have core skill damage, critical strike damage, and vulnerability damage. And then, of course, the last weapon, we have crit strike damage, strength, core skill, and vulnerability damage as well. And on this weapon, we have Conceited, which I briefly went over. Circle of Echoing Furies on the ring, crit strike, crit damage, resource gen, and damage to close enemies is what I have. Resource gen, vulnerability, physical damage, and crit strike. This isn't the best ring, but it's just what I have. I do have Bold Chieftains, I actually have 2 of them. Now, as far as what is required for this build, so as I'm hovering over the final piece here, and you can kind of look at what I have. Damage reduction while fortified, cooldown, very important. Rank 3 all defensive skills, that's what you want. And then rank 3 of while up, because I'm out of gold, as you can see, 243k. And it's just what I have built. So how can you make this build work if you're not a high level? Let me show you. Until you're getting ancestral gear, you're not getting the rolls you're seeing on the gear that I have. So this is where you have to go back into everything I said that I didn't take. Prolific Fury, perfect example if you're trying to do this build early on. Tactical Ground Stomp, another perfect example if you're trying to do this early on. Now, you may want to take Lunging Strike for the Fury gen, but I'm pretty sure you'll be okay with Tactical Ground Stomp because 25 Fury is kind of a lot. Instead of just spamming an ability, and I guess, I mean, there's some mobility in it, but I don't know. Your cooldowns will never sync up until you have this gear, so you're going to have some downtime, and what better thing to use during the downtime than an AoE stun, right? Okay, so what you're going to do is you're going to get rid of Unbridled Rage. This is the main thing right here. So everything else that I added is going to be good for you, but Unbridled Rage is going to be the hardest thing to kind of cover because it increases everything by 100%. 100% more expensive is crazy unless you have the resource reduction costs and the Paragon Tree points that give resource on crit and hit, all of those things. So if you're low level trying to make this work and it's simply not working for you, like I've seen many players struggle with, get rid of Unbridled Rage and just take something like Unconstrained. With the amount of insane damage Berserkers do, this is fine because it will get you through the content that you need to get through, whatever you're doing in the game, however you want to progress, until you get to the Sacred Gear and get those amazing rolls on the Sacred Gear. So just take Unconstrained and then make this swap when you're comfortable. The next tree is the Paragon Tree. Now I'm not going to lie, I'm not 100% on this. I'm going to show you what I did, and when I'm level 100, I'm going to min-max it as best as I can, but there's so many weird things in this Paragon Tree. I know there are guides that have everything written down, but I'm not convinced they have the best Paragon trees. I'm just not. There are so many crazy options and combinations you can run here, and I've been seeing people just go full damage, and yes, I am playing softcore, so I get it, but full damage is never going to be the way. I get people trying to do like these insane numbers, and it may look like I'm trying to do that, but I'm not. Like I said at the start of this video, I made this build to survive more, and it ended up doing completely busted damage. So I'm taking as much damage reduction as possible, like damage reduction from vulnerable enemies because we have pretty high uptime and we instantly vulnerable everything around us when we stun them. And that's huge. Like, that's huge. So yes, there's stuns, so they're not doing damage anyways, but it's still a really, really big thing. So we have that going on, and of course we're stacking vulnerable damage. So I'm just going to show my Paragon Tree, and I'll highlight the glyphs. So we have Exploit here. We have Imbiber with healthy damage, and we're healthy quite often. We have Marshal. I don't think Marshal's in the right spot, so I have to figure out a better spot because this is garbage. If you don't know, resistances are trash in this game. Unless you have a certain amount of resistance, which it's hard to sacrifice so many slots for, I've never seen good things about it. We took Warbringer here, which is important. More Fortify, always nice. This is really key. Hungering Fury. Fury on kill, maximum Fury, all that good stuff. Over here, Hunter Killer, massive. Huge, huge elite damage. You gotta have it. And then there's movement speed after killing. Fine. Fine. The next one we have is going to be Might, which is very strong. We also get vulnerable damage and damage reduction from vulnerable enemies. So as I kind of showcased that a little bit here, then I went up here for more vulnerable damage and armor, even though armor does fall off in the end game, which that's definitely a topic for another time. And now I'm up here where I have Wrath. This is the final one. We have damage reduction while healthy because we're scaling more damage while healthy and less damage taken while healthy. You see how that kind of works together? It is what it is. And from here, I'm actually not going to another glyph because for the bludgeon build that I found so far, going through all of these other glyphs, they're just not worth it. Like the one for maces specifically is Crusher, and we don't overpower. That's not part of this build. We're not doing anything with overpower. So instead of going to a whole other tree, I mean, it's early. I'm only level 90. I'm acting like I'm 100. I took this node, Fortified, plus 10% damage while fortified, 12.5 while healthy, so more damage scaling. Then I'm going to get another 10% damage while fortified once I hit the willpower threshold. So I'm taking these, I'm going down here, and I'm taking tenacity. Health is good. I have decent health, but I want more health. I don't care if this is wrong. I don't care if this is unoptimal. I would like health in my build, so I'm building health. I only have 6,911 at the moment. That's not enough for me. I need more. This isn't a hardcore player, but I plan to push 80 maps, 90 maps, however high they go. I want to do the last one. And to make that happen, I cannot just simply stack damage and keep going. So that's where I'm at. You can copy this Paragon board if you would like, or just read the nodes. you will have a pretty decent understanding of what they do, and it'll be easy for you to make your own Paragon boards, even if you just want to copy the glyphs here. So with that being said, green gems in the weapons, skulls in the accessories, and blue gems in the armor slots. And after that, I'm pretty sure I covered everything on the build. I hovered through every piece of gear here. Crit on movement is okay. Increased armor, which is good. Fortify from Fury, nice. Whirlwind pull-in, barrier, the 2 bold chieftains here, very nice, and of course limitless rage, which is very good as well. So all of this works. You can copy and paste and use this to your advantage here. Now that I kind of explained things, you should have no questions about this. And like I said, this build pumps. You're going to be shocked. I know I was shocked when I first made this. I do happen to have a really good weapon, but like I said, even if I didn't have a crazy weapon at the moment, if you start going down in levels, just think about it. Lowering the damage I'm doing now, which is like 1.4, 1.2, 1.1 million crits per swing. If I make this weapon like a 650, which is kind of easy to get with good substats on it, we're not going to subtract half that damage. We're not just critting for 500,000. We're still critting for 600,000, 700,000. The targets are dying faster. They're being stunned. They're not hitting you as much. So to conclude this video and pretty much wrap this up, what does this build do? Instead of bleeding damage that makes them bleed and still hit you through that bleed, I went for raw damage. Kill them faster, take less damage. On top of that, stun layer. What does stun do? It protects you from getting hit, and it increases the damage they take. Another massive benefit. And outside of those few factors, everything else is the same. Everything else is the same. So hopefully you enjoyed this build. Hopefully you understood everything that I said, explained it to you like I showed you. I have not seen a build going 30 levels higher than their current level in Nightmare Dungeons. I just haven't seen it. Maybe I haven't been looking hard enough, but let me know in the comment section what you think. If you have any questions, let me know. I will answer them as best as I can. The game's early. I'm not saying I'm the first one who made this. This is some meta-breaking thing. Someone's probably come up with this before. To say I'm the first one, I don't believe it. There's way too many people playing this game, and they probably tested this. But it pumps the output. Like I showed you, you cannot deny what I've showed you. It's absolutely incredible. I'm going to stick with this for a while. I do have other weapons that I want to use and test out for other builds. I guess I can just show you really quickly, even though this is kind of a long video. So, other weapons that I'm holding. I have an 808 sword that I will not be using, an 809 sword that I will not be using, an axe that I will be using because it rolled well. Close damage, crit damage, all stat strength. Not the best, but it's 813. How can I complain with that? So that's what we're doing. That's what we're going with here. And I'll keep you guys posted. I'll make more content for sure. It's been fun. And listen, I'll see you all in the next video.